I guess the main thing that motivated us to look into this whole area was fairness. We know that the vast majority of recruitment processes are now conducted online. I'd say 99% of them. A significant proportion of those, certainly the effective ones, will draw on some form of structured assessment like psychometrics. We also know that neurodiverse people are underrepresented in the workplace. And what we wanted to feel confident about was that the experience of applying online, of doing an assessment, was not an obstacle or a barrier to anyone on the basis of any neurodiversity they might have. The other thing we knew was going on was that there are a lot of assumptions, misconceptions, maybe even myths around neurodiverse, neurotypical candidates and the differences between them when you ask them to take a test. There seems to be a widely held perception that neurodiverse people are somehow always going to do worse on an assessment than someone who's neurotypical. And we couldn't really see from the research, from case study, that was clearly true. And I think we wanted to look at that in more depth. We also wanted to explore whether the prevailing advice about how to adjust assessments for neurodiverse people stacked up. It always seems to be give them 25% more time. But again, we couldn't see a great deal of evidence driving that piece of advice. And we also wanted, I think, to confirm our suspicion that, and this is a bit of an assumption, that, the online experience might be off-putting for some candidates more than it is others. And we really wanted to look into the notion that moving things online was somehow going to exclude some people. It's a particularly important topic for HR, for recruiters, for employers, because they want to get it right. They want to do the right thing. They want to be fair. It feels at the moment like there's understandable anxiety around employment legislation. You don't want to kind of break the law in the way that you hire people. But more than that, there's a genuine desire to treat everyone fairly, to give everybody a level playing field. So we really wanted to find out some answers that would help employers to do that. I really love it when you find out something counterintuitive through research. And there were certainly some surprises in there when we looked at the results, when we compared neurodiverse and neurotypical candidates and the way that they perform and respond to online testing. We didn't find the kinds of differences in test scores between groups that perhaps people expect. We didn't see a result where neurodiverse candidates were doing always worse than neurotypical. And in fact, on some tests, the neurodiverse candidates did the same or better than the neurotypical candidates without any form of adjustment. We also found an interesting result whereby on some tests, neurodiverse candidates not only did the same or better, but they also took less time than the neurotypical candidates on average, which kind of makes us ask a question about the whole blanket 25% adjustment rule. I think the one message that stood out most for me in the results was how shaky some of the assumptions we make about neurodiversity and performance on psychometrics online really are. Neurodiverse people didn't just do worse on everything. They did the same or better on many tests. They didn't need longer on a lot of tests. And I think the surprise for me, and it was a pleasant surprise, was really about how we need to take a more nuanced look at the way we handle requests around adjustments and the kind of preconceptions or assumptions that we're making when we look to introduce testing and kind of maybe worry about how it might impact on some people. In a high-stake recruitment process, that's one where essentially there's a job hanging off it at the other end. You're kind of highly motivated to do well. There are implications on mood for all people. No one really likes being tested. Something fits getting in the way of a job that they would like to win. And so we're expected to see some differences in mood for people generally. What was interesting was how few differences there were. We did 2 measures of mood. One was kind of how people were feeling before they took the test. So we might be expecting apprehension or nervousness. And the second measurement was after the tests online. And I guess we were interested in what the emotions were then, whether there had been any change. When we look at the 2 groups, neurodiverse candidates did feel worse going in than neurotypical candidates on average. So a lot of people who were neurodiverse maybe did feel a bit more apprehensive or low mood before they took the tests than neurotypical candidates. But remember, people vary, and there was an overlap between the 2 groups. What was interesting was that for both groups, nothing changed. So neither group took the test and then felt worse about themselves or felt upset, depressed, or felt they'd been through a kind of grueling experience. Their emotional state wasn't affected by the experience of the tests themselves or the online journey that they were taken through. And that for me was really interesting, that there is no impact of using the tests, using them online on mood. The biggest practical step is probably to look at the candidate user interface, the kind of web experience that some people have to kind of follow in order to complete the tests. That potentially we found in the kind of follow-up research was the biggest source of potential frustration for all candidates. If your web experience is clunky or frustrating, if candidates are being sent to lots of different places to do different things, it's that frustration more than the assessments themselves that tend to affect mood, that tend to introduce ambiguity, uncertainty, and maybe increase the difficulty for some people when they're taking the tests themselves. So definitely have a look at the actual quality of the online environment. And I'm not just talking about, is it accessible? Does it comply with the WCAG standards for accessibility, for example? I'm talking about the experience of it. Is it likely to confuse, frustrate, or annoy some people, neurodiverse or not? I guess another key outcome of this research, certainly in terms of the policy recommendations we make as a result of the research itself, is to avoid using a one-size-fits-all approach to adjustment and accessibility. I think there is a tendency, certainly in very high volume processes, to apply a blanket rule to anybody who says that they need help with assessments. And that blanket rule is normally the magic 25% extra time. We have still not really been able to clarify where this rule comes from. It possibly comes from the educational assessment domain, where 25% can be a common time allowance given to students when taking exams, for example. But psychometrics are not exams, they're different things. So a time adjustment isn't necessarily going to help all candidates. And indeed, what we could see from the results is on some of the tests, the neurodiverse candidates were quicker anyway. So our recommendation instead would be look at each candidate in a more individualised way, ask them ideally what adjustment would suit them. It isn't always going to be around time. Maybe a time adjustment just feels like you're throwing them a bit of a bone. For me, these are the main takeaways from this research. First of all, stop assuming the worst of some groups, certainly neurodiverse candidates. They are people like everybody else. People vary in their performance on tests and their experience of online assessments, but stop assuming that everyone's going to do worse if they're in that group. The second takeaway is stop using the 25% rule as a kind of one-size-fits-all adjustment for everyone who wants one. Take a more individualised, nuanced approach to making the test work for people. And lastly, good web design floats all boats. It's not just neurodiverse candidates who feel frustrated or confused when something is clunky or ambiguous in the way it's been put together. If you improve the web design, then you improve it for all candidates. We also know from previous research that the other thing that floats all boats is practice. So the more preparation, the more access to practice materials you can give to candidates prior to being tested, that will help everybody, not just neurodiverse candidates. So never forget the importance of that. There are plenty of practice materials online. Your published test provider should be able to provide practice materials for your candidates as well. And there are some good books available in all good bookshops by me.